one of my favorite things to do is to read books set in other places, so that I can have a glimpse into, and of course, you take it with a grain of salt because it is fiction, but it gives you many clues into what life is like in those places that you may never have the opportunity to visit in your lifetime. Hello, this is Janine, and you're watching Janine Journeys and Books. I'm so glad that you joined me today for another video. So this channel is all about what I am reading, what I've recently read, my thoughts on those books, and hopefully you will find your next great read from some of the books that I mention here on my channel. So what I'm going to do today is just discuss some of the books that I've recently finished, and then after that I'm going to share with you what I'm currently reading right now and how that's going, and so let's get started. So the first book that I've recently finished is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, and that's written by Gail Honeyman, and this was actually Miss Honeyman's debut novel, written in 2017, and I have to say this was absolutely impressive for a debut novel. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I'm just going to give some adjectives just to describe before I get into the synopsis of the book. So this book for me was powerful. It was moving. It was eye-opening. It was endearing. It was enlightening to certain aspects of mental health that I was not aware of. It was a very emotional book, and also a book that really made me appreciate and value human connection, people that I have in my life, people that are there that I just may take for granted that they're there. This book really made me appreciate having people in your life who you connect with. So I believe I'd mentioned this book in a couple of videos ago, and I misspoke when I said that this book was set in Great Britain. And the reason I said that, I listened to this book on audiobook, and I also went into this book with no foreknowledge of what the plot was going to be like. I went into it pretty much completely blind. So I listened to this on audiobook, and the narrator had a British accent. So from there, and I also heard words like flat and queue and pub. So a lot of words that we associate with British culture. But actually, this book is set in Glasgow, Scotland. The author, the narrator reads with a British accent, but she also does switch over to a Scottish accent with some of the other characters in the book. So the premise of this book, wow, and I hope in describing this that I can come across sharing with you how deep this book really was. On the surface, it's very funny, it's humorous, it's quirky, but underneath there are some serious themes and situations that are dealt with, and I really think the way this is written really reflects overall, before I get to the synopsis, how there are people that we see every day and we're like, oh, hey, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? And that's, the extent of our conversation. And underneath the surface, there's a lot more going on with people that we see every single day. There's a lot more going on that we are never privy to, because our conversations are so brief and limited, and we're busy and we're on our way, or we don't want to impose, or we don't want to pry. And sometimes there's a lot more going on underneath the surface, that sometimes things happen and we're like, wow, I never would have thought, I never imagined. So yeah, that's a major theme, which I really think is explored well in the way the book is set up. So as I mentioned, the book is kind of comical. This book follows a woman named Eleanor Oliphant, who is I don't think she's reached 30 yet. I think she's a 20-something professional. She works at a graphic design company, but she has nothing to do with graphic design. Her job is basically as an administrative person. She mainly manages the accounting, the bookkeeping, and she's held that job for a number of years. She's worked around the same people, same boss for years. However, she basically just goes to work, goes to the grocery store, and goes back home. She has absolutely no social life. She has no friends. And that is the extent of her life. And the other thing about her that's mentioned pretty early on in the book is that she has been in some kind of accident, so to speak, as her face is burned on one side. So she has disfigurement on one side of her face, which also, people are kind of hesitant to come up to her. One, because she is so quiet and introverted, and at the same time she has this physical deformity, which kind of, to be honest, scares some people away. So one day, and this is all in the very beginning of the book, one day she has a problem with her computer, and she calls for someone from the IT department in her job to help her. And for some reason, this person becomes her first real friend. And the way this develops is just so honest and sweet and just natural, and just it's just heartwarming the way their friendship develops. And I'll leave that there because I really want you to explore that if you decide to read this book. The other thing about Eleanor is that she is incredibly book smart. She knows facts about cultures and countries and scientific facts and things have to do with health. I mean, she's brilliant as far as book knowledge, but she is incredibly socially awkward. She has no idea about the current lingo, how people talk. Like, she takes things that people say as slang, she takes them literally. So a lot of times she is clueless about what people are saying. And sometimes she will say things that to her make complete sense. And people are looking at her like, what? And a character that she reminds me of is Sheldon from the TV show Big Bang Theory. If you've ever seen that show, you know that Sheldon is incredibly smart. He's brilliant as far as physics, and I think physics is his area of expertise. But as far as social skills, he is completely lacking. Now, the thing about Eleanor, I sometimes I get the impression that Sheldon was a bit self-centered. I don't get that about Eleanor. Eleanor is she's just like ignorant, not in a bad way. She just has no knowledge of social customs because she has no practice with it. Like I said, she has no friends, and she basically just goes from work to home to the grocery store, and that's all. So there's a lot of quirky things that she says that will literally have you laughing out loud. Like, one example is also in the beginning of the book, there's this member of this band that she has become enamored with. She is literally obsessed with this man. She follows him on social media. She tracks every post that he makes, and her goal is to one day meet this man at a concert, and in her mind they're going to fall in love and they're destined to be together forever. So, knowing herself that she is a bit socially awkward, she sets about to revamp herself, as in her physical appearance, her clothing, some of the social graces, and some of this she enlists the help of her new friend Raymond. But she doesn't completely divulge why she's doing this, but she has a plan that she's going to just present this new and improved self of hers to this band member, and he's just it's all going to be perfectly fine. And one thing she does is that she goes to a retail store for the first time and gets some new shoes because she wears the same thing to work every day. And the shoes that she gets are the salesperson recommends for her are higher than what she's used to. I think they're 3-inch heels. And she literally says, I think this store and some other chiropractic group, I think they're in cahoots to cripple women in this country. So she literally takes that, there's no sense in the world why anybody in their right mind would wear 3-inch heels. It's ludicrous. Whereas we're like, okay, it's fashion, but in her mind, it makes no logical sense. So there's other little quirky things. And again, I really hope, because I don't want to give the synopsis away, but I really hope that even though there's humor in this, there's quirkiness in this, there's some dark things that are going on with Eleanor. There's a reason why she is so reclusive. There's a reason why she doesn't have any friends until now, when Raymond has, he's really made an effort to connect with her in a way that she couldn't refuse. I mean, he's really been that friend that she needed. But there are some things going on in this book. This book does deal with mental health. So if in any way that's a trigger for you, that's something to be mindful of. And there is some mention of child abuse that occurred in the past. So that may be another trigger to watch out for. And there is a bit of profanity because one of the person, I don't want to give too much away, the person who renders the abuse, there's profanity used in how this person speaks, and I'll have to leave it at that. But so there is a little bit of that in this as well. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this book. One of the other reasons I said this book is relatable to me personally, I don't think I've ever read a book where a character had eczema. And I know that's a minor thing, but the way this is explained, and you see how Eleanor suffers with it, how she talks about, you know, having to wear gloves. And, you know, this year, my hands have gotten to that point, I think for the first time in my life, of suffering with eczema since a child, where I had flare-ups that were so bad that I had to wear gloves. And so after reading this, you know, I had a deep personal connection with her in, you know, the painful, blistering, cracking hands and having to wear gloves, and people don't understand, and they may think you're just a germaphobe, and it has nothing to do with that. You're just trying to get your hands to heal and also prevent infection, because the integrity of your skin is compromised. And just how she clearly understands that it's stress that's driving her, and how hand sanitizers are just like horrible. You know, I could completely relate. So I think one of the other things about this book is that it is so deeply relatable. You are, even though Eleanor doesn't communicate a lot with the people around her, you are completely in her head. You are in every thought she has, and a lot of the thoughts she has are things that we've thought and probably been afraid to say or didn't want to admit. So this book is deeply relatable, even if you're a person that's never suffered from any mental health issues. I think it can really help you somewhat begin to get a glimpse into what certain aspects of that may be like. So I've gone on and on about Eleanor's Oliphant is completely fine, and I've got like 4 more books to get to. So I'm going to stop there. I do recommend it with the caveat of the trigger warnings that I mentioned, but yeah, check that one out. So the next one, it's a graphic novel, and I mentioned in a few videos back that I was looking to read a graphic novel because it's not something that I read often, and my kids are really into them. One of my daughters in particular, that's pretty much all she reads. I'm trying to get her to branch out. But a viewer and a friend of mine kindly recommended When Stars Are Scattered, written by Omar, Mohamed, and Victoria Jamieson. And I finished that. I read it on my Kindle. I got it through the Libby app, read it on my Kindle, and I absolutely enjoyed this book. It is a middle grade graphic novel. It is the story of it's a true story. It's actually based on this man's life, Mr. Mohammed's life. And he became a refugee from Somalia based in 1991. He was at the age of 4 when he had to flee his village. And he left with his younger brother who has a disability. His father was killed. His father didn't make it. His mother in the tumult of them trying to get out and get away, because the gunmen were there in the village and everyone's running, screaming. In the tumult, the mother tells them to run to a fellow villager who can help them, and she will meet up with them when she can. And so he then goes with his younger brother, and they end up in this refugee camp in Kenya. And the story then goes to show his life there, the things they experience, and it is so real. I mean, and it's told from a child's point of view. So it's starting off with him probably about 7 or 8 years old, where he's completely responsible for his younger brother, which he's probably about a year younger than him. And it's just wow. I think the thing that gripped me most about this book was just the waiting. How you're waiting for years for something, anything that's different. Just this years of just being in no man's land. You can't go back to where you came from. You don't belong where you are. You don't know where you can go. So you're just there. You know, how do you work? How do you better yourself? You want to, you have skills, but how? You know, the lack of food, the lack of basic necessities. There's a quote from the book, and I'll leave it there because I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. Highly. Even if you're an adult, get it. It gives an incredible perspective from a real person who lived in a refugee camp. He's dreaming one night about the possibility to go to America. And he's just dreaming about what it might be like. And he says to himself, I wonder where the kids in America sleep. I don't think they sleep in the dirt like I do. And I read that and I was just like, wow. Wow. I mean, I'm not a wealthy person, you know, but just reading that made me grateful for everything that I have. I may not live in a fancy, expensive house, but who am I to complain at all about my life when there are people in this world right now, as I film this video, who are living in situations that are unbelievable. And so I highly recommend this. I mean, he even gets into like when reporters come, because we see it all the time when news reporters go to places and, you know, they come, they film, they show you the worst of the worst. And he's like, they get in their fancy cars and they drive off. And it's like, now what? Is anybody going to do anything? You know? So yeah, When Stars Are Scattered, amazing book, highly recommend. Along those lines, there was another, I wanted to mention, if you're interested in reading about books set in Africa, there's a website that I came across, and I had a note to mention this in one of my videos, and I think now would be a great time to do that. There's a website called booksafricana.com. I'll put the link in the description below. But this website features books that are written by Africans, and many of them are set in Africa. But if you want to read books by African authors, that's a great website. You can go right there. They have lists of books that you can choose from. And again, my channel is about journeying in books. I am a huge believer, or one of my favorite things to do is to read books set in other places, so that I can have a glimpse into. And of course, you know, you take it with a grain of salt because it is fiction, but it gives you many clues into what life is like in those places that you may never have the opportunity to visit in your lifetime. And there was another book that I read this summer, in case you're interested in books set in East Africa. This book is called The Shadow King. It was written by Maaza Mengiste. This book was actually set in Ethiopia, and it is set around the Italian invasion of Ethiopia in the 1930s, I think it was around the First World War, but basically when the emperor was driven out. And the book actually it's fiction, but it's based on real events, and it focuses on some of the women who fought, the Ethiopian women who fought against the Italians who were invading. It is a powerful book. It is a violent book, I will say that. I mean, this is a book about war. It's a book about guerrilla warfare and some of the prisoners of war that were captured, sometimes dealing with how they were tortured. Sometimes it definitely dealt with how they were tortured and killed. So it is a graphic, violent novel, but I read it for the historical aspect of it. I did not know very much at all about the Italian invasion of Ethiopia or Ethiopia's role in during the world wars. So this definitely opened my eyes. I did a lot of nonfiction research after reading this. So if that is a topic that you're interested in, that's a book that I read this summer, and I think you may find it valuable to read, with the caveats that it is a bit violent. All right, so that is books that I have read. So let's get into what I am currently reading right now. I'm currently reading 2 books. One of them is on audiobook. One of them is on my Kindle through the Libby app. So the audiobook, I've mentioned this before, I'm still reading Empire of Silence. I think it's a 22-hour audiobook, y'all. So it is taking me a little bit to get through this one, by Christopher Ruocchio. This is a fantasy, somewhat sci-fi novel. It is set in the future, because I think Earth as we know it, it wasn't, I'll have to fact check me on this if you've read it. Earth as we know it now, I think, was destroyed or either greatly damaged. So the civilization, there are new civilizations that have come about, and they live on different planets. There's an alien species that they are at war with, and Hadrian is a character who's somewhat of the nobility. And so the things that he's grappling with, one is this war that's going on. Should it exist? Should it be happening? Because he has had the opportunity as the nobility to study different things. And one of the things that he studied is this alien species that they're at war against, to the point where he can even speak their language, which not many people can. And he has no relationship with his parents. His mother tries to avoid being at their castle, the place where they dwell. She tries to avoid it as much as possible. The father is a very cold, very brutal ruler. He's very smart, but he's also very brutal. And his younger brother is following in the footsteps of his father. And there's a lot of turmoil there about who will be the successor. There's also, again, like I mentioned, turmoil because he has no real relationship with his parents. And he even mentions that in discussion with one of his mentors, that, Hadrian, you're basically just a tool. You're a tool for political power. There's no love in this family. His parents are tools. His maternal grandmother is a high-ranking official. And again, all of them are just tools and pawns for political power. The marriage was a political marriage. So you're seeing how he's dealing with that. Because of all the characters, he seems to be the one who has the most humanity, the most compassion. And where I'm at now, we see that there is a great conflict, and he potentially is about to go into exile. So I'll leave it there because I don't want to give too much away, but I'm enjoying this one so far. The other book that I have on my Kindle now, and I am just starting, like I literally just downloaded it last night, and it's called The Lemon Tree. And this is a little bit different for me too. This is set in 1967 after the 6-Day War. I think this is set in Israel, and it is exploring the relationship between an Arab man who is just coming back to this region after he was a child there. They were exiled, and he's coming back after 20 years with two of his either brothers or friends. And he's coming back to see his childhood home. However, this childhood home is now occupied by a Jewish woman who was brought there as an infant. So for her, this is her home as well. And so there's a relationship that develops. And again, as I mentioned, I'm just starting this, so I have not even ventured into this book. I'm just going off the written synopsis. But clearly there's going to be some conflict there. And it's going to be really interesting to explore this relationship between this Palestinian and this Jewish woman. So I am really looking forward to reading this, looking forward to seeing some of the cultural, religious, political aspects of this conflict, this tension. I've done a lot of reading in nonfiction, research-wise, trying to understand the Arab-Israeli conflicts that have existed in the Middle East from Bible times up until now. So really interested in seeing a fiction work that will explore this topic. So that is what I am reading now. I would really love to know in the comments, what are you reading? Put emoji, put the title, put the author. You can just put not reading, I'm looking for something, still waiting for recommendations. Let me know in the comments how your reading is going right now. And I hope to see you in the next video. I will mention next week is my birthday week, so I will not see you next week. I've got big plans coming up, but I should see you shortly thereafter with another video. Take care. Bye-bye.